What's happening, ladies and gentlemen? E Avery here with the next lesson in the Children's Book Council Make Your Own Storybook competition. Now, the last time we were together, we explored the idea of writers having their very own toolkits, the same way tradespeople do. If an electrician goes to a house and they need to fix up the electrics, they've got their toolkit with their screwdrivers and their pliers and their drills and all that kind of stuff, and they use the correct tool to make sure that they get the job done properly. Now, writers also have their own toolkits, and you pull out different writing techniques and different tools to make sure your writing is exciting, to make sure it's varied, to create pace, and to really impress your readers or create a sense of suspense. Now, the last lesson we spoke about the first five, and of course the first five, number one at the top of my list is show, don't tell. We talk about that all the time. We also spoke about adding in to a sentence. We spoke about adding on to a sentence. We spoke about changing your sentence type. And we also spoke about changing words, so making your language more precise to make it more, I guess, interesting and unique. We're going to continue with that. I'm going to do the next 5 things that you should have inside your toolkit. And we're going to start with number 6, which is to vary your sentence structure.
You're going to get sick of me saying this, but varying our sentences is super important in our writing to make sure that it isn't monotonous, that it sounds exciting and different as we move through, to give us, just a bit of variety in our reading. So number 6, vary your sentence structure. Now, there's a few styles of sentence that you can create depending on the effect that you want to have. So I like to use simple sentences a lot, especially when I do picture books. My readers are generally a little bit younger. I like to keep it really simple so that I can communicate a simple message. So an example of a simple sentence over here: she stared at the wall of fog blankly. Now, simple sentences are great, but sometimes when something is a little bit more important, or you want to add a little bit more detail to let someone know something a bit more about it, then you can have a compound sentence where you add extra information, where you've got a conjunction joining the two. A compound sentence might look like this: she opened the curtains and stared at the wall of fog blankly. So giving us a little bit more information about what the girls are doing before she looks at the fog. The next type of sentence here is a complex sentence. There's a comma in there. It's a little bit trickier. It's longer. It's probably easier to make mistakes in a complex sentence, but if you're a confident writer, go for it. Chuck a few of those in there, because it does give a nice sort of flow to your writing. So the complex version of this sentence: as soon as she opened the curtains, she stared blankly at the wall of fog. With these 3 sentences here, the first 3, they're focusing on the fog as being the main thing that we want to focus on. But maybe the fog isn't the most important thing that you want to focus on. Maybe you want to minimize the fact that there's fog there, and you just want to sort of talk about the fact that she's opening the curtains. In that way, you can flip the whole sentence around and start with an adverbial phrase. So I'll show you what I mean. The last one here: opening the curtains, she stared at the fog. So this sentence, the last one, kind of makes opening the curtains the most important part. So lots and lots of different ways to change up your sentence structure. I guess the question you've got to ask yourself is, what am I trying to communicate here? Do I want to go into lots of detail, or do I just need to keep it simple for my readers?
Number 7 on your writer's toolkit is to use special effects or to keep things deliberately plain.
When using special effects, I like to think of this as salt and pepper for your writing. Now, you imagine you chuck on too much salt onto your food, it's going to taste terrible. Same with using special effects. Use too much of it and your writing becomes overdone and almost unreadable. But it is really, really cool when you want to paint a picture for people in their mind and do it quite poetically. So there's two ways you can do this. You can add sound effects using onomatopoeia or alliteration. So things like onomatopoeia, where you make sounds. The fireworks fizzled and cracked in the night sky. So fizzled and cracked, you can almost hear those sounds in your mind. Or alliteration, where you have the two words next to each other, both starting with the same letter. So the cowardly crocodile stalked the mouse. So cowardly and crocodile pair really well together. It sort of emphasizes our main character here as well, which I'm assuming he is. You can also paint pictures in people's heads with imagery. Things like simile, metaphor, personification. Here's a few examples. First, we'll start with a simile. It's where you compare something directly to something else. So a ruby as red as blood sat on the pedestal. It's comparing the ruby to the red of blood. So the blood ruby sat on display. This is a metaphor over here. The blood red ruby. So it's calling the instead of comparing it to something, it's calling it that thing. And then at the bottom here, you've got a bit of personification where you give an inanimate object human qualities or human characteristics. So a ruby winked a bright red light in the morning sun. So we know that rubies can't wink, but we've given it that to, I guess, make it more relatable in our readers' minds. Now, you can overdo things like this, so you've got to be careful. If you wrote a sentence like this: the slinky shiny snake slithered slowly sideways seeking. So this is an example of overusing alliteration. It's really over the top, and it doesn't add to your writing. It actually distracts people from what they're doing. So even though, like I said, these kind of special effects, they're amazing in your writing, be very careful, use it sparingly, just like you'd put a little bit of salt on the top of your work to add more flavor, but don't overdo it, otherwise you will have writing that is inedible.
Number 8 on your toolkit is using hooks right at the beginning of your paragraphs to draw your reader in.
Hooking your reader is something that you do right at the beginning in your opening paragraph, but it's also something that you continue to do throughout your book, throughout your story, to make sure that your reader's going to continue turning those pages. Now, what I like to do when something new or exciting is happening, I like to get a really good hook in there, and especially in a picture book, I like to leave the reader wanting to turn the page, so having a slight cliffhanger on the end of each spread to make that reader want to turn the page over. So an example of an opening hook, so this might be something to begin with. I dive straight into the action. I don't waste any time with long, drawn out, blown out descriptions. I want to get that reader excited, ready to read on, just like that. So, she told me not to bring my pet bird back from the dead. I wish I'd listened. Pretty cool, right? Straight away, you're excited to know more. Here's an example of something that might be at the end of one of the pages to try and get the reader to want to be excited to turn the next page. So, words, and then I was just about to turn off my light. That's when I felt, and then that could be anything. That's when I felt something sharp dig into my ankle. I don't know, whatever. But hooking your reader at the beginning of a paragraph and sort of towards the end, super important, especially when you want to introduce something new and you want people to take notice of it. Find an exciting way to introduce it straight away. Don't go into long, drawn-out descriptions.
Number 9 on your toolkit is to make every word, phrase, and sentence count. To make sure that we aren't rambling, to make sure that we are using our language as concisely as possible. Very important when you are writing a picture book in particular.
Very important to make every word earn its place, especially in picture books where you trying to keep words to a minimum. finding ways to shorten your sentences so that you can still communicate what you want to communicate without overdoing it is a really, really important skill. So for example, the blood was pouring out of his wound, right? We can just simplify that to the blood poured. You get the same effect, and you use 3 words instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 words. So that's just one sentence. You can save yourself 250, 300 words if you just go through your manuscript and ruthlessly cut out everything that you don't absolutely have to have. You don't try not to repeat yourself if possible, and avoid rambling on and on with boring descriptions.
Number 10 on our toolkit is to slow down or speed up at significant moments in our story.
So slowing down or speeding up at key moments is really, really important when you want to set the tone for whatever it is that you're writing. Over here, I've got a horror scene about a monster that is coming out from behind a door. The first one is when I slow down the action to build up suspense. The second one is when I speed it up to make things more frantic and furious as part of an action scene. So, the slow version first. The door creaked. The handle started to turn. A creaking sound came from the rusting hinges as the doors swung out halfway. Drip, drip, drip came the sound from behind the half-open door. All right, so that's building up suspense. You don't know what's behind the door, and we're going real slow there. Let's see what happens if I speed that up and make it more of an action scene. The door slammed open and a slobbering, screaming creature leapt out. All of that is one sentence. Over here, I've used probably about 3 or 4 to get to the point where the monster's being revealed. So think about what you want. Do you want it to be frantic and fast, or do you want it to be slow and careful, or do you want it to just be somewhere in between? It all depends on how you are structuring your sentences.
And there you have it, guys. The top 10 tools for your writer's toolkit. And in case you do not remember what they are, if you'd like to print them out so that you've got them in front of you to remind you as you're doing your editing of your final draft, I've put the link in the description down below. This is a Talk for Writing writer's toolkit, and I find it really handy. It's not something that I usually have printed out in front of me, but I do refer to this in my head all the time because of obviously my experience as a writer. I pick these things out pretty much automatically as I write now, and it will become automatic for you guys too, the more that you do your writing. A good question that you need to ask yourself as you're doing your editing is, what do I want my reader to feel right now? And what do I need to do to accomplish that? Do I need to add in some great imagery? Do I need to put some similes, some metaphors in here to kind of paint a more vivid picture in people's head? Do I want to speed things up a little bit to create an action scene? Do I want people to consider something for themselves with a little bit of show, don't tell? Do I want to just give very, very brief descriptions of things so that I can move on to more exciting parts of the story? Am I over-describing something? Am I under-describing something? Do I know enough about my characters to make people care about them? Or are they a little bit flat, nothing interesting? I don't know anything about their hopes and dreams. Are my characters developing properly? Have they learned something? So many questions, guys. Just think about it. Think about how you want your reader to feel at every step along your story, and then use the techniques, use the tools in your writer's toolkit to make that happen. So, for homework, please make sure you're reading, make sure you're drawing, get that draft done, the final edits done. Make sure that you've got a bit of space underneath each part of your writing, and to do those more complicated sketches for people who are doing picture books. Otherwise, if you're just doing a storybook, just focus on writing the text out. And that's it. I will see you all next time. Happy reading, happy creating.